Are you afraid of the dark? If not, you probably were when you were younger. Go ahead, admit it. There is nothing shameful in it. Fear of the night is one of the most common human instincts. It has kept us alive for thousands of years. Even when nothing is there, even when we're perfectly safe laying in our beds, we still flinch at the creak of a floorboard or the brush of wind against the window. We hide under the covers because something in us whispers that whatever waits in the dark cannot see as if we're small enough. If this sounds familiar, then you understand my friend David. Was afraid of the dark since the day I met him. He slept with a nightlight and stuffed animals guarding the corners of his room. He swore that shadows whispered from beneath his bed, and that something was crouching in his closet. We laughed it off. His family called it imagination, and teacher said he would outgrow it, and he did in a way. He stopped talking about ghosts in middle school, and by the time high school ended he seemed like any other young man. But there was always a twitch in his eyes whenever the sun dipped below the skyline, like he was watching for something. None of us could see. I need to say this before I continue. This is not my story. I was only a witness. The horror belonged to David and it destroyed him. He is no longer here to explain, but I feel I owe him this one last attempt to be understood. He deserves more than to be remembered as a troubled boy who lost his mind. He deserves the truth, at least as much of the truth as I can share. Solaced in carefully, because what happened to David changed how I see everything. It made me doubt the safety of daylight. It made me pull my curtains tight at night, not to keep out the dark. I'd keep out the glow of the city itself. By the fall of 2015, David had moved into a new apartment with his girlfriend Savannah. It was a high-rise building on the east side of the city. A glass and concrete block with huge windows overlooking the streets below. They were excited about the place at first. Savannah loved the natural light and the view of cars snaking through the avenues. David smiled and agreed, but he noticed that his voice lacked conviction. He never liked sunlight streaming in, and he closed the blinds whenever he was left alone. I brushed it off, fashed a bit until Savannah called me one October morning. Her voice shook as she said, "Amber, something is wrong with David." She told me that David had grown paranoid. I insisted on shutting every blind and turning off every light in the apartment. Even during the days, she would come home and find him sitting in the living room with nothing but the faint glow leaking around the curtains. He flinched when she tried to switch on a lamp. He muttered that the light made it easier for something to find him. Savannah pleaded with me, "You know him better than I do, please talk to him." She sounded desperate, and I promised I would. When I saw David for lunch later that week, he nearly froze. He looked like he had aged a decade in a few days. His skin was pale, his lips cracked, and the spark in his green eyes was dulled by thick shadows. He trembled constantly as though a current was running through him. He smiled at me, but the smile looked painful. I asked if he was sick. He said he had not been sleeping, that maybe it was just insomnia from school and work. I wanted to believe him, but I knew better. I pressed him, and at last he admitted something was haunting him. He tried to laugh it off, but his stare cut through me. He said, "It only comes during the day. When the apartment fills with light, I can feel it pressing close. I cannot see it clearly, but I know it is there. At night, I am safe because it cannot find me so easily in the dark." I wanted to call him crazy, but I could not. His fear was too raw, too real. It crawled under my skin. I asked him if it was us, then he looked over his shoulder, twitching. "No, I do not see it now, but it is always near." He begged me to believe him, and for the first time I did, at least a little. I convinced him to see a counselor on campus. He also went to a doctor and received medication, sleeping pills, anti-anxiety tablets. For a few weeks things seemed better. His color returned, his hands steadied, and he even joked a little. Savannah told me he was opening the blinds again. It thought maybe we had beaten whatever madness had taken hold. But then came New Year's Eve and everything collapsed. We went out with friends to a nightclub downtown. The place pulsed with music and flashing lights. A disco ball spun above us, scattering multicolored beams across the floor. We were laughing, drinking, dancing. And David suddenly screamed. It was not a startled cry, but a blood-curdling wail so loud it cut through the music and froze everyone in place. He clawed at his own face, shouting, "It is here! It is here!" The bouncers dragged him outside while he thrashed like a man possessed. We found him in an alley, slamming his head against the wall and shrieking that the thing had come for him. We rushed him to the hospital and needed stitches for the gash in his forehead. He was admitted to the psychiatric ward. The doctors diagnosed him with schizophrenia. They said his mind had conjured an entity with glowing red eyes and a twisted face. He rambled in the rappy about how the shadows of his childhood had been protectors trying to shield him from this new tormentor. He drew sketches of the thing, but demanded they be destroyed. Savannah saw one and told me, if hell is real, those are the creatures that live there. The doctors increased his medication and eventually he calmed down enough to be discharged. For a while he was stable. He moved back in the apartment, but his habits changed. He refused to keep lights on and grew furious if Savannah tried to open the curtains. He claimed the sunlight made the thing stronger. He covered the windows with newspapers, tore out the bulbs, until the place was a cave. Savannah could not stand it. She left him early in the spring. I visited him a few times after that, but each time he was thinner, weaker, more frantic. He ignored my calls and texts. I feared he was slipping beyond our reach. By Mark. David had vanished from campus entirely, has stopped attending classes, stopped showing up for work. Noon could reach him. Savannah called me crying and begged me to check on him. I could not go that day, but the police eventually performed a wellness check. What they found chilled me. David had blocked every trace of light from his apartment. The windows were sealed with layers of newspaper tape and even blankets. The bulbs were gone from the sockets. The only things left were piles of instant coffee packets, empty pill bottles, and a skeletal figure hiding in a closet. Weighed only 90 pounds, a 6-foot man reduced to almost nothing. He attacked an officer when the flashlight hit him, breaking the man's nose before being restrained. He was taken back to the hospital where he slipped into a catatonic state. He mumbled sometimes about his end coming, about the thing waiting for him. He would not eat properly and had to be monitored constantly. The doctors said suicide watch, but I knew better. David was not planning to kill himself. He was preparing for a battle that none of us could see. On March 25th, the nurses found him dead in his room. The bed shredded, the walls spocked with holes. A syphilis or claws had struck them, blood everywhere. His body bore defensive wounds. He had fought until he could not fight anymore. Yet Noon heard screams. No alarms were triggered. The autopsy was inconclusive. No human explanation was offered. David's death shattered me. He had been my closest friend since childhood, and I had watched him spiral into madness, or what like madness. But deep in my heart, I believe he was telling the truth. Something came for him, something born of the light itself. He always said the shadows had tried to shield him when he was a boy, and I wonder now if the whispers she heard at night were never monsters at all, but guardians warning him about what was waiting in the day. People remember David as a poor, insane boy who lost his grip in reality, but I cannot accept that his death was violent and unexplained, and his fear was too precise to be coincidence. The city lights that spill through windows at night, the neon glow of signs, the sterile white bulbs of office towers, I see them differently. Now I keep my curtains closed in my apartment dim. I walk more at night than during the day because the darkness feels safer than the glare of morning. I am telling this story because I need someone to understand that our fear of the dark may be misplaced. The dark hides things, yes, but sometimes it hides you, Swell, it shields us from what hunts in the open glow. David deed fighting something none of us could see, and if he stays silent, then his struggle means nothing. I want people to remember him not as a lunatic, but as a victim of something far worse than madness. So if you ever feel that primal fear tugging at you when the lights go out, do not be so quick to dismiss it. Do not laugh it off like we all laughed at David. Darkness can be a refuge. If you want to survive, listen to me. It is not the dark you should fear. It is the light that brings the monsters.